they've had 1,000, just literally 3 or 4 a day die. And this was last year, babies who were dead less than 1 year old. That's what we classify as a baby. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the hypocrisy is beyond you. So that's the first. So if now in Operation Protective Edge, which was one of the Jewish operations in Gaza, in Operation Cast Lead, and there's about 2 or 3 other ones, right? In those operations, thousands of Palestinians, almost all civilians, just like they're saying now, the United Nations just showed that 70% of the people that died in Gaza were women and children. Women and children aren't Hamas members.
Right.
So, so if you have 2,000, 3,000, and we can show that's true, children and babies killed by Israel in these invasions, right? And that's a much higher percentage than what the Gazans did. And nobody's defending a child being killed, especially not intentionally.
Right.
But Israel knows exactly what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So if this makes the Gazan people or the Palestinians terrorists, are monsters. So when Israel kills 50 times that or 1,000 times, 100 times that, what are they?
Yeah, that's all the war crimes.
They're monsters. Mm-hmm. They're the biggest monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other issue is another good example, which I think even your younger listeners and viewers can judge this for themselves. The other thing that's really apparent, right? Let's just take a look at why did the Gazans, they actually took some prisoners back to Israel.
Right.
Well, maybe because 200,000 Palestinians have been tortured in Israeli prisons, kidnapped from their families.
Right.
Maybe because of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Most Palestinians at some point have been imprisoned by Israel at some point, and often mistreated terribly in those imprisonments. Now, how is that different than taking some civilians back to Gaza so they could trade and get their own wives and kids and brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers out of the prison?
Right.
And how many right now Palestinians have been kidnapped by Israel? And by the way, at least half of them, they're not even a charge against them. There's no legal justice.
Just do it for the hell of it.
Yeah, they're actually held. Some of them have been held for decades without any charges, and then they get tortured. And now we know they get homosexually raped. And the Israeli parliament was debating, and they were saying that there were many activists in the Israeli government. In fact, they went there and rioted, not against the rape of the Palestinians. They rioted against punishing the guys that are raping men in trains, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of stuff that goes on. So on that standard, you hear about the Jewish hostage. They took 250 hostages, right? Mm-hmm. You hear about hostages every day. You get their names. You get who they are. There's 20,000 Palestinians now being tortured and imprisoned and raped, many of them, in Israeli prisons and concentration camps.
And the media doesn't cover it.
And by the way, Gaza is not it's not a refugee camp. See, refugees are like you got a flood, you got a hurricane like we have in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And you kind of become a refugee. You have to leave your home because of this circumstance or whatever. And refugees have almost a thing, well, poor refugees, right? It's not these aren't refugees. These people are put into concentration camps. That's what it is. It's a concentration camp. Put them behind bars. It's not like these are refugees. A refugee can go back home eventually.
Right.
If you're a refugee from a hurricane, you're a refugee from a particular occupation for a minute. If it goes away, you get to go back home. The Palestinians have never been allowed to go back home. 700,000 were kicked out of their homes, their businesses, their farms, and they were this happened because of terrorism. They terrorized them. They did massacres at Deir Yassin, for instance. So they terrorized these people, drove them out their homes, and then when they left to try to save their families, when they tried to come back, you couldn't come back.
David, a lot of Republicans don't know that Palestine actually existed.
Of course, if you look at any map of the world for the last few hundred years, even back to Roman times, Palestine.
Right. Yeah.
Palestinian. It's Palestine has always existed, and that's none of the dehumanization, right? It's like Palestinians don't even exist.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I mean, if Palestinians don't exist, then you can't be charged with killing them, right?
Right.